Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to FRS Decision 2016. I'm Zach Pels. Tonight we're going to bring you exit poll data from our student team at the 4 town voting locations, as well as discuss some of the candidates and the issues that are affecting our nation. Tonight we'll be talking with Senate President Stan Rosenberg, Representative Steve Kulik, Selectman Trevor McDaniel, and Paul Newman. We will also be live video conferencing with the Dutch High School from across the Atlantic that we did our student exchange program with. My co-hosts today are Melissa Shaw and Aaron Dorshow, and I'm going to let Melissa introduce our first guest.
First, we have Mr. O'Rourke. He is the selectman from Conway. So let's begin.
Thank you, Melissa.
So, how do you think people from Conway voted?
Voted for who?
Sure.
Well, I certainly think everybody from Conway supports Steve Kulik, who's our local rep, and probably Adam Hind got the votes for the Senate because he was endorsed by Senator Downing. And I think most people in Conway have met him, and I think he's going to carry on for Senator Downey, who is very, very popular. On the presidential front, I would think that Hillary Clinton got most of the votes.
Yeah.
As far as policies go, something I would have liked to have seen more of were the energy and environment policies. They both seem to have them, but it wasn't really a focal point of the debates and everything. So how effective do you think their proposed energy policies will be?
Well, I think that certainly Massachusetts is very conscious of renewable energy and environmental preservation. And I think that as a state that leads in both of those areas, okay, I think that we may get some help from the federal government, depending upon who gets in, because certainly renewable energy and environmental preservation is extremely important for everybody in these times.
Also, in this election, both Trump and Hillary have plans for education that are very opposite from each other. Trump seems to support private education, and Hillary seems to want more affordable and public education. Which one do you think is better?
Well, I certainly think that we have to support our public schools better than we're doing now. As far as some of the plans that have been proposed by the Democrats, as far as tuition-free college, is a stretch, because paying for that would be extremely difficult. There are ways of getting those benefits for education, but I think we have to put more money into our public school systems rather than go for any other alternatives.
So sticking with schools, how do you feel should the charter school bill in this state get approved? How do you think that will affect students at public schools?
Well, I voted against the charter school question. The reason for that is because it does take money away from public schools. I think the idea of charter schools is good, but the way we're now funding those schools takes away from the 96% of students that go to public schools.
Sticking with the other ballot questions, how did you feel about question 1 regarding the casinos and slot machines?
Well, I thought the advertisement for the slot parlor was very interesting, because the young lady comes on and says, well, we're making $88 million in tax revenue from one slot parlor, we're going to make $88 million from a second. That's not going to happen. Okay. If you put a second slot parlor in, you may make a little more money, but aside from the fact that I'm kind of against gambling as a moral issue, I really voted against that.
One of the most talked about issues on the ballot this year was the legalization of recreational marijuana. Mm-hmm. How do you think that legalization of marijuana would affect us as residents of the state?
Well, from what I understand, that question may pass. Okay. Personally, I voted against it. Again, we have an opioid crisis in the state that is taking the lives of many young people. Marijuana has always been seen as a gateway drug to more advanced drugs. I don't see how we can possibly, again, from a moral point of view, back recreational marijuana, because it's just there's just too much involved with it, and there's too much in terms of the danger it can bring to young people and to our society as a whole.
Understandable. Now, one of the least talked about issues would be question 3 regarding how animals are treated on farms. How do you feel about that?
Well, certainly the humane treatment of animals is very important, and I think that question is going to pass without a problem.
John O'Rourke, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up next, we will have interviews with Selectman Trevor McDaniel, as well as Stephen Kulik, and our statistician Aaron Dorshow will break down how people are voting throughout the 4 towns. So stick around.
Welcome back. With us, we now have Franklin District Representative Kulik. Welcome back. With us now, we have Franklin District Representative Stephen Kulik. He is the Vice Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He is a long supporter of Frontier Election Program and has been on our program each year. Thank you, Mr. Kulik, and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. It's a nice tradition to continue.
Yes. So today is a very important election year. So how do you think you are doing?
Well, I appreciate that question. This year, I don't have opposition on the ballot, so I think we're doing pretty well. You know, I've had contested elections in the past. I always expect to have an opponent, and then some years you don't. So I think that's some kind of affirmation from the voters that they think I'm doing a good job, and so I'm looking forward to starting a new term, to serving once again in the legislature and representing the 19 towns in my district and all 4 towns that are in the Frontier School District. Conway, Sunderland, Deerfield, and Whately are all in my district. So it's been a real privilege for the past 23 years to represent them, and I look forward to continuing in the next term that starts in January.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, considering those 19 districts you're representing, which question on the ballot do you think would have the greatest impact?
That's a really good question. I know a lot of people have focused on the ballot questions this year. I think probably question 2, the one on charter school expansion. I know that many of the advocates, supporters of question 2, have said that it would not have an impact on schools like Frontier, districts like this, that it's primarily raising the cap and allowing more charter schools is primarily geared towards urban areas, big cities, Boston, Holyoke, Springfield, whatever. However, I do think it would have an impact here, and I do, while I'm not philosophically opposed to charter schools, I do think that charter schools, the way that they're funded by the Commonwealth and through local tax dollars as well, but even more importantly to me, the way they're governed and operate is of great concern to me. And until we can figure that out, until we can figure out a way to provide more funding for all education across the Commonwealth, and until we can figure out a way to make the governance of charter schools more transparent and more accountable to the voters whose taxes support them, I have real concerns about allowing you know, at least a dozen new charter schools every year. So I think the polls have been very close on this question prior to voting today. But I think they've been trending a little bit towards defeating question 2. If question 2 is defeated, or even if it's passed, I think the legislature is going to have to do a lot of work on educational funding and governance and some of the issues that face this school around state mandates and curriculum and standardized testing and all of the other kinds of issues that affect public education.
Okay, so question 4, the legalization of marijuana, is a very controversial topic, and it looks like it's going to pass today. Do you think the state is ready to handle the legalization of recreational marijuana?
No, I don't. I think it may well pass today, but I think that the state is not ready, and the ballot question was not very well written. It leaves an awful lot of questions to be answered about how we are actually going to create and regulate a new sector of business in the cultivation and the sale of marijuana. You know, we have had 2 referendums in the past, one that decriminalized the possession of an ounce or less of marijuana. That happened, I think, 6 years ago. And then 4 years ago, the voters approved medical marijuana. And if we just use medical marijuana as an example, the establishment of the system, the rolling out of that program after the voters voted for it, was absolutely abysmal. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. It did not happen quickly enough. It was really botched in terms of setting up a regulatory and approval process for medical marijuana dispensaries. So this is 20 times bigger if question 4 passes than medical marijuana was. and at least, it may be more so. And I don't think we have the wherewithal at this time, and not enough guidance from the way the ballot question is written to do this smoothly without the legislature having to make some changes in it. And we can do that. When a referendum is passed by the people, we first of all respect that the voters, this is what the voters' intent is, this is what they want. But it is essentially the same as if the legislature passes a bill. And so therefore it can be amended, it can be changed, it can be improved upon. And I think we're probably going to have to do that, or I shouldn't say probably, I think definitely, that if question 4 passes, a very early priority of the legislature when we reconvene in January will be diving deeply into some of the shortcomings and some of the positive things about question 4, how to make it work better than what happened with the rollout of medical marijuana.
That's a really good point. Speaking about preparedness for these possible outcomes from the ballot questions, do you think we are ready to handle slot machines if there would be another establishment?
Yeah, that's a good question. And question 1 is to allow another slot machine facility is a really strange one because it is promoted by a single business group that want to form a very specific business operation near Boston to create an additional slot parlor. Now we have legalized gambling in Massachusetts. We have one slot parlor that's open in Plain Ridge or Plainville, I think it is. It's called Plain Ridge. There's another one that could be allowed, which hasn't been permitted yet. And then we have 3 casinos potentially in Massachusetts, and there's one under construction in Springfield now. There's another under construction just outside of Boston in Everett. And then there's the potential for another one. So to me, we have as much gambling potentially that we can hold, we can absorb in Massachusetts. I think this is a case of a wealthy, well-funded business group with a particular agenda using the referendum process in Massachusetts to put a very self-serving question on the ballot that I don't think is all that well represented or understood in the public. I know they've had a lot of money to put into TV ads. I've seen some of the TV ads, which I find really strange because mostly they use law enforcement folks, police officers and retired police officers, to talk about how this is going to generate a lot more funding for cities and towns and for our state budget. I just don't see it, and I don't think we need it. I think we have a very capable gaming commission already and a law that allows up to 5 gaming facilities. We have 3 either built or being built right now, with more on the way. So I hope question 1 doesn't pass, and not only because it's unnecessary to add another slot parlor to Massachusetts gaming facilities, but also because I don't think it's right for a private company, private investors, to use our referendum process, which is really to allow the public to promote, sort of social changes and laws that have a lot of public demand and public support. I think it's a misuse of the referendum process, so I hope it's defeated for that reason.
Okay, so question 3 talks about farm animals and how they're raised and treated. A lot of people think it's reasonable to have this law passed since you want your animals to be treated humanely if they're going to be eaten. But also, some people say that it's just targeting one farm. How do you feel on this issue?
So in the legislature, I spend a lot of time working on agricultural issues. It's one of my priorities because I represent such a, breadbasket of the Commonwealth in the Pioneer Valley. Farms are an important part of our culture and our society and our economy here in the Connecticut River Valley. And so it's an issue I know a lot about, and I've studied this question, and I've studied similar questions around the country that have been put forward. And I voted today against question 3, and my reason is that these practices that they propose to outlaw in Massachusetts do not take place in Massachusetts. We do have one egg farm very nearby to here, Diamond Egg Farm in Wendell, which is a 60-year-old plus family farm, and they treat their birds, humanely. They could be affected by this law. But the other aspects of the bill, which deal with the crating of veal calves and pigs, those practices aren't done in Massachusetts at all. And so what the proponents of this bill are really looking at is to regulate practices that do take place in other states, and primarily with production agriculture, large-scale production agriculture. If you go to states in the Midwest, whether it's Iowa or down south into Georgia or South Carolina, places where a lot of pork, a lot of beef, a lot of eggs are produced. And they're trying to regulate the practices there. Now, I'm the first to say absolutely animals who are used in animal agriculture for food should be treated absolutely humanely. They should have the best safety conditions and health conditions. That's not what this question 3 is all about. Question 3 is all about using Massachusetts as an example to influence agricultural practices in other states, and to do it through economic and trade issues. So there's no question that it will raise prices for people to buy food in Massachusetts. Eggs may go up, $1 a dozen, perhaps. They've had experience with this in California. And that's going to hurt lower income people who rely on eggs as a great source of inexpensive protein. So we'll see what happens with question 3. I feel that it's very likely to pass, because the advertising on it has been very one-sided. You have farmers on one side and consumers who don't have a lot of money to spend. You have some very well-financed national organizations who are promoting question 3. It is likely to pass, but I don't think that's the end of the story on this issue. I think it is likely to be challenged in court, and we'll see where that goes. And it would be challenged on the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which basically says that states don't have the ability to regulate interstate commerce, that is a function left to the federal government. And what this question would do is fundamentally say to another state, whether it's Georgia or Iowa or wherever, if you want to sell your product in Massachusetts, you have to follow these particular practices. And I think that's highly questionable as a matter of law, and is likely to be litigated in court.
Well, it's very nice hearing an informed opinion on this issue. Not many people really know much about it.
Well, it's been a little bit under the radar screen. And again, it's one of those issues that sounds good. Of course, who would be for mistreatment of animals? But that's not really what it's about. I think that's kind of a smokescreen for a deeper agenda that the proponents have on this issue. But we'll see what happens. I don't think whatever the vote is today on question 3, it's not the end of the story by any means.
Okay, thank you.
Well, which which issue on a more national perspective do you think is most important? Because right now, there's kind of a lot being said between Hillary and Trump, more about the drama in politics and not really their policies or the issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, it's been a disappointing presidential campaign to me, and I've seen a lot of them over the years. And I'm voted for Hillary Clinton today. I hope she is elected president. I don't think Donald Trump is qualified or is temperamentally fit to be president. But that being said, I think it's a disappointing campaign to almost anyone who follows electoral politics, because the discussion of issues that are important to this country has been buried. And some really critical issues have not been talked about at all. And part of that is the fault of the media for not asking these questions when there are debates or when there are interviews with candidates. And some of it has just been the way this particular election between these two people has been very toxic and very personal, personality-based. I blame that mostly on Mr. Trump. And issues such as one that I think is the critical issue for our future, climate change, has not been talked about at all. It never came up once in any of the 3 debates. And that is a disgrace, because it absolutely affects our future economic and environmental well-being, particularly for folks your age who are going to be on this planet for another 60 or 70 years, and what happens to this planet in terms of quality of life and ability to raise a family and live in an environment that's healthy is really dependent on how we deal with the issue of climate change. So although it was not debated and discussed, and I mean, Hillary Clinton certainly has a policy platform on climate change. Donald Trump just doesn't believe in climate change. He thinks it's a Chinese hoax. So he doesn't even take it seriously. She will take it seriously, but I think it also is dependent upon Congress to take it seriously and to try to do something about it. The signing of the Paris Accords was a critical point. I mean, I think that President Obama has led and brought us to a very good place with our partners in the world on climate change, but it's going to take a sustained effort to meet the goals that are set forward in that accord. It's going to take world leadership to do it. I'm hoping this will be a high priority for Hillary Clinton, and I'm just disappointed that it was not debated and discussed because it's the kind of issue that I think voters need to participate in the conversation and people need to become more educated on it.
Well, thank you, Representative Kulik. It was really nice having you today.
It was great being here. You folks do a great job, and I really enjoy being part of this every 2 years. So hope to see you in another 2 years, right? Or any of you, you'll probably all have graduated by that time.
Yes.
But, hopefully your successors will be here doing the same thing. But thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll be back soon. Okay. Hi, I'm Aaron Dorshow. During the day, students from the Frontier Regional School conducted exit polls at the 4 voting locations in our district. Among the questions were questions like who the person voted for, questions about the issues, and other questions about voting behavior. Let's begin. So, first we have the overall presidential results. It looks like Hillary Clinton is overwhelmingly winning, with a 15% of the people polled voting for Donald Trump, which is not very surprising. We live in a very liberal area. And it looks like Jill Stein and Gary Johnson both got small slivers of the vote, which is also not very surprising, being in a 2-party democracy. No one really votes for anyone else, which is kind of sad, but let's see. So we polled each person on what issues they thought were the most important. Overall, people thought the economy was the most important, which is reasonable since the economy is still recovering from this recession in 2008. Energy policy came in second, which is also very reasonable. We need to figure out a way to provide energy for the United States, but also help the environment. With healthcare coming in a close second, seeing Obamacare kind of start to stumble really does make a difference in people's lives, so it's also very reasonable. Foreign policy, also very important. It's a very even split across many issues. So many people have different views, which is perfectly fine. Okay, question 1, casinos. It looks like the majority of people do not want a new slot machine casino approved, which charter schools, the same thing. 73.5% of the population in this area don't want charter school question approved. That is probably because of the push by the local school districts and the school districts in general trying to get more funding and not have funding taken away. Farm animals. So 66.9% of the population voted yes on the farm animal question. You just heard from Representative Kulik about this question, but it seems like at least people around here want it to pass. So we'll see how that happens statewide later. So it also looks like the legalization of marijuana also, the majority of people also want that in this area, 66.5%. So that is not surprising. We are in a very liberal area, but the consequences could be dire, so we'll see how that plays out. So here we have the percentage. We have the percentage of each person voting for president by town. Looks like the highest percentage voting for Clinton was in Deerfield with a little more than 75%. Next up was Sunderland with a little under 75%. Then Conway with about 70%, and then Whately with about 40%. Very interesting how Whately probably voted for other candidates other than the two, since their percentages don't particularly add up, which, unlike the other towns, it looks like almost half of Whately voted for third-party candidates or not at all for president, which is fascinating. So it looks like the majority of people 18 through 35 wanted Clinton to be president. Very few wanted Trump. And it looks like Trump also had a good turnout for 36 to 55-year-olds. Okay, President. So most liberals voted for Clinton, obviously. A small percentage of conservatives voted for Trump, which is interesting. A lot of people have been talking about Trump's temperament for the job, which a lot of people don't believe he has. So it seems like that's playing into the results. It also looks like many moderates are voting for Clinton. It looks like they have been swayed by her arguments or just been pushed away by Trump and his insults of almost every person other than white people. So there was our data. I would like to welcome you back in a few minutes. Thank you.
Media coverage definitely affected the way I voted because it portrayed some of the presidential candidates in negative and positive ways, and it really had a big impact on my decision on who I chose.
Media coverage definitely affects the way I vote. So in order to get a good perspective of what's going on with the candidates, I try and get a bunch of different perspectives from different newscasters, different media sources. Because I do think if you stick with one, they do have a bias and kind of perspective on that one person or one candidate. So I do like to switch it up and make sure that I'm getting a well-rounded perspective from the media.
I voted for a policy over party because for party voters, some of them don't actually agree with what their candidate is saying and are just voting because they think party unity is the only important thing.
I think an important issue facing the U.S. currently is foreign policy. I think we need to focus more on it because places such as Syria and other places are experiencing a civil war and people are dying and they need our help.
You're good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I think this election, 2016, is so important and more important than any that I can remember because the country is so divided. And both these candidates tend to be disliked to a great extent, although each has their supporters. But there's been so much focus on negativity, lots of misinformation out there. I think depending on who gets elected, each side is going to be angry, I think, and how we deal with it as a country is going to be really important. And I don't remember ever living through a time like this before. Okay. And I'm not really all that old. But yeah, I think it's really, really important because of just how crazy everybody is right now. And I think more important will be November 9th. Thank you.
This election is definitely more important than previous elections because the millennials are really involved this year and we're able to vote. We can get, ideas from social media and really see who the candidates are from the news and just, like Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So it's important in this election because we have a new generation of voters who can voice their opinions.
I, for one, am not in favor of the charter school expansion, mostly because, me personally being a public school student, I don't necessarily see the need. Additionally, from what I've researched, it seems that the charter school expansion will take funding money away from already underfunded public schools, and a lot of those, when public schools are underfunded, it's usually in the arts program. And me being an art student, I'm very involved with music at school. I would definitely see my my very coveted music program take a huge hit. So I, for one, am not in favor of charter school expansion.
I am not in favor of the charter schools. It takes money away from our public schools. Thank you.
I would say no because it takes money away from public schools and stuff like the musical arts program. I'm big into that. I've done band for like 5.5, 6 years, and it's a really big part of my life at this point. I like to play in the band for the football games and Memorial Day. It's really important to me in my everyday life. And yeah.
So I am in support of regulations on the conditions of farm animals, because in other states, when it's been more regulated, it's been only positive. And I don't think that there's any real justification for not having animals have adequate space for movement, and they're being raised.
State ballot question 3. Do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? And I believe that farm animals should be treated more humanely than they are, because they are quite abused. And would you like to be abused like them?
On question number 3, do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? I say no, because I think that animals should be treated better on farms.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Zach Pels, once again, joined by Melissa Shaw and Aaron Dorshow. And we're just going to have a general discussion about what's happened so far. So, Melissa, what do you make of, first of all, let's talk about the exit polling we did today. So, how was your experience with that?
It was a great experience because it was really great to see how much people actually cared to go the extra mile and take the exit poll. It's not required. So the participation was really great.
Yeah, speaking from experience, I can also say the voter turnout in the town of Conway in particular was very positive. And a lot of people were able to share their thoughts with us, which I thought was a great thing. We just heard a very informed opinion on question 3, which is something we're not used to hearing. So did Mr. Kulik sway any of your minds on this issue at all?
Oh, yes, actually. This issue is not very mainstream. Not many people are talking about it. I personally have not seen any television ads about it. So hearing someone who knows what is going on, who knows the facts behind the issue, has actually read is very enlightening, and he has swayed my opinion.
He also swayed my opinion. I know that he's only one source, and I haven't necessarily sought out the other, but he was very informed on the matter.
Okay, so going back to the national election,
yes,
it has been rough to say the least, as no concrete policy has really been discussed during the course of the debates. Do you think that this is going to be the course for the future, or do you think this is a one-time deal, and just because a big character like Trump was involved to such a great extent with this, that it was just a one-time deal?
I think it's kind of a ripple in time. Even if you're going crazy on conspiracy theories and looking at Nostradamus, they have said that he has forecasted this election between Trump and Hillary. I think maybe things will be ironed out soon enough after this blows over.
Yeah, I think this was definitely just one election. I think after this, we will not have elections where the facts are not really important. We will actually talk about the issues. This election was more about anger and personality. I believe the elections after this will hopefully settle down and actually be about the issues that matter to people.
So staying on the the subject of Trump, should he win or should he lose? I should say. What do you think? Where do you think he goes next? Because I really don't think he's going to go away after this. He's going to have a presence some way or another. What do you think he's going to do?
Well, there have been rumors that he is in talks to start a television network if he loses, which kind of to replace Fox News and more conservative network, which seems possible. It's difficult starting a television network, obviously, but it seems possible. It also seems like he may go the route of Bernie Sanders and kind of start his own foundation to support other senators and representatives who support his views and try to get them elected. It might be a good way, if he doesn't win, to forward his beliefs.
Also, I'm not particularly sure what position he would hold, but he's a figure who's kind of put out these ideas which no one has really said before, and he's gonna kind of be someone who's looked up to by many, which is kind of concerning.
So we are being presented currently by one of our producers some data that has Hillary ahead 48% to 44% over Trump. Do you foresee this changing in the coming hours?
As we get more data, I'm sure the percentage points will fluctuate greatly, but I do think Hillary will win. But that data will change until the night is over and we have solid results from many of the swing states. Since this data is definitely preliminary, we do not have any state being done polling people yet, so everything could change.
And that 9th hour FBI whatever that happened about Hillary, it seemed to damage her at first, but now that the FBI said that they really don't have nothing, they have nothing on her, then it seemed that her popularity went up a little bit, so I think it shouldn't change too much.
I think it's pretty safe to say that Clinton will win Massachusetts, as we are a very liberal state. Why do you guys think that we live in such a liberal state and there's less political diversity, should we say, amongst us?
I believe a lot of that has to do with our state has many colleges, and colleges are often very liberal places, and they kind of spread their ideals. We have 4 colleges just around this area and many more across the state, and they're some of the best in the nation. So I think having a lot of educators and having some of the best education in the country really helps cause us to be more liberal than others.
Also, there's the entire reputation that people are trying to uphold.
All right, so we will be right back with our students from the Dutch Exchange that we did recently over the fall. So do not touch that dial. We will be right back.
Mr. Murphy? Hi, do you hear me? Mr. Tablets, Mr. Murphy?
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Yes.
Just a few minutes. Wait.
One moment, we're having some technical difficulties. Let's do
Very good.
Just do a countdown. Just show them a 5.
Zach.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay. Zach, go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I would like to welcome our Holland exchange students. We're Skyping them, and they're in Holland at the moment. Okay. So.
Now let's just talk to them.
Okay. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Zach.
I think the main question that I have for you guys is really how is the election being perceived overseas, because I don't think as Americans we really get a chance to get a point of view from somebody who's not from this country.
Yeah, that's I think that's a fair question because in the United States, of course, we see the polls and we see that there is a very tight race between Clinton and Trump. But what we have here is that we consider it impossible for a figure like Trump to be so popular in the United States. I think it's very I can say that to you since you're living in a very liberal state. But here it's like people are just flabbergasted by the fact that a mogul like Trump is able to be so high in the polls. And I think if Trump wins tonight, we will see that as an embarrassment for the United States. To be very honest, I hope you're insulted by that.
Not at all. Do you think that opinion is common across Europe?
We don't hear you, so perhaps you can speak a little bit.
Sure. Do you think that opinion is common across Europe?
We don't have any sound.
Do you think that opinion is common across Europe?
I'm sorry.
No. Zach.
He was asking if you thought that this was opinion was common across all of the European countries, or just you guys.
So, yeah, we got the question right this time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So across Europe, whether it's the same everywhere as Saunders just pointed out. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So yeah, so there are a lot of countries in Europe that are really liberal, like Netherlands. There is, of course, the Scandinavian countries. Germany is like us. And I think they all think the same. There might be some countries toward the south, maybe some of the people in the UK that are supporting Trump. But since Europe, and especially Northern Europe, of which we are part, is so liberal, we are just, even if it wasn't Trump, even if it was I would say a true Republican, like Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or someone like that, it's already, Europe is so pro-democratic and so anti-Republican most of the time. And even now, especially now, there is some person like Trump running. The general consensus is just that is unimaginable.
How do you think the media influences what you guys perceive?
De enige die dat iemand die jongen die vooraan zit, dus die spreekt blijkbaar echt in het Japans, dat moeten we even duidelijk maken.
We didn't hear the question. To be honest.
The question was, what kind of influence does the media have on what we see here?
Well, I think if we talk about the Dutch media, I myself, when I'm following the American media, think the Dutch media portray a totally different view of things. Mostly pro-democratic, as we just pointed out, like most people think. Media here are quite pro-Clinton and anti-Trump. I think even more than people would be if they watch American media, if they watch CNN or maybe even Fox News. I think Dutch people have a different view on American politics. So I think our media are quite pro-Clinton, and that is also kind of suits me.
Okay, so how do elections work in your country?
Okay, so we can only hear the nice gentleman in the green suit.
No, it's fine.
Sure. Yeah. The only person really have, that we can really hear.
Okay, so the question was, is the election process in the Netherlands similar or different to the United States?
Not at all. We have, instead of 2 parties, we have 15, 20, 25, like a lot. So we have nothing similar to the American system. Also, because we don't elect a president, because we are a monarchy, he doesn't have any influence, the king, but we elect a prime minister, and he comes forth not out of an election, but we elect parties. And the leader of the biggest party that forms a coalition with other parties, he gets to be our political leader. So it's totally different. We also don't have a district system. We don't have elections spread out over states or provinces. It's just proportional representation, and it's coalition government always, because we have so many parties. So it's completely different. It's less exciting though, because the electoral map is so cool, and we have nothing like that. We just, we had to wait for months and months and months until a coalition is formed, and then we know who will be our prime minister that we possibly didn't even vote for.
All right, so I have another question regarding how the elections are followed. How closely are the U.S. elections followed in Europe, and why don't you think that we don't follow any European elections or any other country's elections for that fact more closely?
The second part of the question I did hear was, why do you think the Americans don't follow the elections from Europe as closely as we seem to follow them?
Well, I think there's a fairly answer to that, and that's that the United States is, without any doubt, the most important partner for every European country, whereas the United States has some privilege in picking who their partner is. So we are very dependent on what president the United States elects. Is that president willing to be friendly to European nations? Democratic candidates are more enthusiastic about trade with European countries, as you see now. Trump is a bit more isolationist. But yeah, we are. I think we see ourselves as more dependent, because there in the Netherlands we are also very interested in how the elections will go in Germany, because we also are very dependent on how Germany will be after their election. So, and I think the United States is a very large country, has its own very big problems, and needs to have all their focus on that. So yeah, I think it's a matter of domestic, how big the domestic issues are, and also how dependent your country is on other nations.
Mr. Tebbets, do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions? Not at this moment. I was curious to take questions from the Dutch people and answer their questions if they have some.
We didn't get that.
If you had some questions, I'd be happy to answer questions. If you all thought you had questions?
Yeah, well, of course we have, because we're fascinated by the whole about the elections in the United States. Because what I wonder is, are you pro Hillary Clinton in Massachusetts, or are you really against Donald Trump? Because Bernie Sanders also had large groups of voters, and I can imagine in a liberal state of Massachusetts, he also had very, a lot of followers. So is this election really about electing Clinton, or is it really, or is it more about preventing Donald Trump entering the White House?
All right, well, I think it depends upon really what state you're in, because here in Massachusetts, Hillary Clinton beat out Bernie Sanders in the popular vote. So I think Massachusetts as a state is more for Hillary. But if you go to other states such as like Vermont and New Hampshire, that overwhelmingly voted to have Bernie Sanders be the Democratic nominee. I think that could very well be the case for them.
Yeah, I think, I see the Americans, I suppose you're also interested in what happens in other states because, well, Massachusetts is traditionally Democratic, so I can imagine that you're very interested in other states. And especially those states where Bernie Sanders did well, it might be possible that if Clinton is not progressive enough, a third party might arise. How do you feel about the two-party system, and how would you feel about a third progressive party coming up if Clinton doesn't act progressively enough according to those Bernie tracks?
Yeah. My experience with U.S. politics is that you can have a third political party come about, but if they can't get their person elected president, they'll go away. That's what always happens. So it's not as like a parliamentary system where people vote for a party and then the parties look at how much power they were able to achieve and then they can make a coalition. That doesn't take place in the United States. And so presidential politics always coalesce into two parties. And historically over time, what the parties represent has changed tremendously. But yeah, that's kind of the answer to that question. I always emphasize that to my students. I say that if a third party comes about and they can't get their person elected president, they'll just go away. Yeah.
Okay, so now you are talking about party systems already. Maybe it's a nice question to ask you, how do you feel about the Electoral College? Is it something that protects the good way of electing a president, or is it maybe for the current times a bit undemocratic?
Oh, it's completely undemocratic. Next question. It's a carryover from the past when they made the republic and they were trying to come to terms with how to make a union. I mean, much as now today you all are a European Union, and you know that presents political challenges. Well, the United States has been a political union pretty much since 1790. And they had to make a succession of compromises in order to keep the integrity of that union. And part of it was this idea about how chief executive will be selected. So they came up with this electoral college system. It's completely messed up. For instance, here in Massachusetts, it's a rarity for you to see political signs for the presidents. I don't know about you young people, you look around the school district, you don't see signs for electing the president, but you go a short distance into New Hampshire, which isn't very far from here, which is a highly contested state, and the state is blanketed with signs encouraging vote one direction or the other, because the system is primarily a winner-take-all. Whoever gets the most votes in the state will get all the points. So that makes for a lack of enthusiasm and engagement in a state, or an intense amount of competition in a state, depending.
Hi, Mr. Tevitz.
Hi.
I have a question, actually, just from a teacher perspective. I've spent a couple of lessons on teaching my students all about the political system and how the electoral system works. But I've also shared personal experiences about who I voted for and why I vote for who I do. And I'm just wondering, do teachers at Frontier do the same thing? How open are they about sharing who they want to be elected, or do they talk about issues surrounding what's going on, or do they try to remain neutral? And especially in this contested campaign and how this is all played out, are teachers at Frontier actually talking about what's going on openly with students?
From my limited experience, a lot of teachers are very engaged in discussing various components of what's taking place with the election. I think that sensitive and thoughtful teachers need to not, if you will, overtly show their hand for a political favorite. And that's my experience, because I have students who are voting for, whose families are supportive of Hillary Clinton, and other students who are supportive of Donald Trump, and I'm their teacher for all those young people, and I need to respect those families' beliefs and thoughts and perspectives. But that's not to say that a lot of issues and or questions can't be raised and discussed thoughtfully within the school environment.
So it's more or less also you see it as an opportunity to bring common sense to the crack-free zone, which has actually, been an important factor in this election. I mean, it seems that the truth doesn't matter anymore. It seems not only in the presidential elections, it seems to have trickled down to the congressional elections even. So it's also, how do you see your role as a teacher then in this, say in this game? You also see it as a chance to
Okay, you gotta stop and say it all again, because we're not getting enough of what you're saying articulated clearly enough.
So basically, you also see your role as a teacher also as an opportunity to bring common sense back into the field in this election, where the truth has actually not been important at all.
No, I wouldn't say. Common sense isn't the word I would use. I think the thing that's important is that the process can be mysterious. And so as a school and as students and as educators, we need to be as informed about the process as possible. So I think that's the primary goal for both teacher and students. Students to understand the process, teachers to be able to help students learn the process. Does that answer your question at all?
Well, so you'd like to teach them the process, but do you also, because in this election, a lot of nonsense has been told to the voters. Do you also think it's your role as a teacher to explain to students what's nonsense, what's rubbish, and what's actually real? What the facts are in the debates? Do you see that as a role, or do you think it's up to the students themselves to find out who is telling nonsense and who is telling the truth?
Well, I think that by emphasizing the process and also emphasizing fundamental national values, then one can be left to sort of discern, what is truthful and fictitious relative to the campaign. I don't really see the teacher's role as clarifying political claims or counterclaims.
Yeah, you see that as more or less interfering in the political process, I suppose, then.
Yeah, well, it seems kind of, and it's kind of, in some ways, kind of like reduced and like low approach, as opposed to taking a higher approach that reflects, broader ideals and values.
Yeah. So maybe another question would be because when people go to the United States, they warn Europeans, don't talk about politics. Americans won't like that. But in times of the election, you see everybody talking about it. People put signs up in their front yards. Everybody is talking about it. What is true? What of the two extremes is true? And how does that portray itself at the school, your school?
Because your question, the idea is that people should not talk about politics?
No. Well, people are always warned before they go to the United States, don't talk about politics. Americans don't like it and they will cut off the conversation. But if you go to the United States, then a lot of people do want to talk about politics and everybody has an opinion. So what is your view on that?
Well, I think when you're European and you come to the United States to travel, you have a lot of options because there's a lot of people in the United States. So there isn't one.
I guess
there isn't one perspective.
And how is the political engagement at your high school? Are students politically engaged because they can't vote yet? So we are organizing this election night here, and as you see behind us, there are a lot of students that are actually very interested in an election that's not even of their own country. How politically engaged are students about the American elections at your school?
I think it's kind of a mixed bag because you, on the one hand, you have kids who aren't really interested in government or the political process, but on the other hand, you have students like myself and Aaron and Melissa who are in AP government. We're interested in what's going on because we know it's going to affect our future. So it's really not a universal thing throughout our school, but there is some interest there.
Do you have thoughts, Melissa? Were you going to say something? No? Aaron?
I would, but no, they can't hear me.
Okay.
Well, as we stated, many people are very pro-Clinton here and pro-democratic, but in the United States, obviously not. So can you tell us what's the main reason for Trump voters to vote for Trump? Because people here don't really understand.
Main reason to vote for Trump.
Do you want me to take that? I just want to say, just technically, and I think this is true of us too, whoever's in the blue shirt, who's in the center of the three of you, we hear you best because I think you're like most directly in front of the microphone. So if either of you on the other sides, if you lean in to speak into the mic, we can hear you better. So can you say that one more time?
Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Well, as we stated, many people are very pro-Clinton, pro-democratic here, but in the United States there are a lot of Trump voters. So can you explain to us what's the main reason for a Trump voter to actually vote for him?
Main reason for Trump vote. The United States has a long and distinct history that's very different from Europe. And one of the things about the United States is we have had a lot of rural history. We have large cities now, we have a large population, but the United States has been very rural for a lot of its history. And there's been a lot of political values beginning from Declaration of Independence through our United States Constitution forward that really emphasizes the individual and certain kind of concepts of freedom for the individual. And you could kind of encapsulate that into a political reference of what they call populism. It came about the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And I think that the way populist politics plays, sometimes it's large and sometimes it's smaller. I think it's come up recently, and I think that there's a lot of Donald Trump's strength has to do a lot with certain people in the United States who I would describe as part of that populist tradition feeling insecure.
And then there must be a big difference between the populist movement that Trump is an icon of and the actual truly conservative Republican politics, which is different, I guess, and that's also portrayed in many Republicans not wanting to support Trump. So is there a really big difference, and do people in the United States, as a concrete question, do people in the United States reckon that Trump is not a archetypical Republican?
I think they will conclude that if he loses, and then those that have power in the Republican Party need to figure out okay, they've lost 3 elections in a row, what are they going to do? Does that help?
I guess.
You can ask a follow-up to that. That's fine.
Yeah, I have one question.
Move to the mic more.
One question. I suppose you all know Noam Chomsky, right? You all know Noam Chomsky, I suppose.
We all know Trump's views.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he has said a few weeks ago that the Republican Party is, well, in his opinion, the most dangerous political movement in the world, even more dangerous than IS. How do you see that?
How do we perceive that?
Well, how do you see? What do you think of Noam Chomsky's statement about that? That the Republican Party is the most dangerous political movement in the entire world? Because Noam Chomsky is a very influential political activist and a political commentator. So I was wondering, how influential is he in this sense?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think he's built a reputation on being controversial. And, that's where his sort of base of power comes from, being controversial.
I don't know if he actually believes everything he says, but he does sometimes say things just to get people riled up, to get attention.
So you think it's more something he says to fuel a different debate instead of really meaning what he's saying about the Republican Party.
Yes, I think he tries to say many of these controversial things just to get more attention for himself, which it seems to work because you're obviously asking about it now. So it's a good strategy for himself anyway. So.
I don't know if you guys are aware, but I just heard from a student here that there's actually currently a shooting going on in Los Angeles at one of the polling centers. I don't know if you've heard anything about it.
No.
But this is actually kind of a good segue into maybe an issue about gun control. But interesting, just as a side note, that maybe what some people are actually worried about is currently happening in Los Angeles, and there are people wounded, and there's a whole polling station on lockdown. So I'm curious if you knew anything about it, or what your thoughts are about safety within polling centers.
Well, at the moment, we have our many producers looking up information about it right now. Since we've been talking to you, you really can't look at our phones. But I do believe gun control is a major issue, and actions like those you were just talking about are major risks that the U.S. takes if we don't come up with some type of gun control legislation. Did you get any of that?
We got half of it.
Okay.
You want to sit here?
Sure.
Why don't you sit down here?
We got your main point.
Okay, great.
Get my mic off. There you go.
We actually have another question for you guys. What are your thoughts about the whole Brexit situation, and how has that really affected Europe?
Yeah, well, you asked about the Brexit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the fact that the biggest proponent of the Brexit supports Donald Trump might tell you enough. But yeah, the Brexit was really a political shock in Europe. And I think people who are against it are still recuperating from that shock. And yeah, I think most people have now accepted the result of the referendum, and I think we just need to wait what's going to happen. And I think the opponents of the Brexit referendum, I think most of us here are. We just expect it will have will have devastating effects, especially on Great Britain. Yeah, I think we just hope that it won't break down the whole European Union as it is now. And yeah, Europe is built up in such a complicated way. It might take years for this process to unfold completely. So we're just waiting what will happen, and hopefully the results won't be too bad.
Okay. Yeah, I remember waking up in the morning after Brexit and being very surprised. So I'm sure everyone in Europe was also shocked. And anyway, we just got new information about the shooting that's going on. There's at least 4 people injured. There's a police station nearby, and the polling station's on lockdown. The shooter is still active, and many of the reports are unclear at the moment, so we'll wait for more information on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Zach, do you want to go?
Sure, I'll take these. We've got some polling results here. Which one is Trump and which one's the right's Hillary?
Do you want to clarify that before we go live with that?
All right,
so
so
pass that back so I can these guys clarify. Clarify. H or T, yeah.
Okay, while we wait for that, do you guys have any more questions?
Well, actually, some of our other students have a question. They talked about it in class today, so we'll have one of those students ask a question right now. One.
Our group came up with the question, and it was, could you come up with one good reason to vote for Donald Trump?
I honestly
Could we?
Great. Group discussion time.
It's a loaded question. Excuse me, under the advice of counsel, I want to let you know that in the United States you have the Fourth Amendment privilege not to incriminate yourself, so you don't have to answer that question. Part of our constitutional privileges in the United States, we don't have to answer questions that incriminate ourselves. So we're not going to answer that question.
We know that from CSI and Law and Order and stuff.
The Fifth Amendment. Fourth, it's not the fourth. Sorry. But I got the concept down.
Yes.
Another question then, I think. We really want an answer though.
You really want it?
Okay. Don't listen. I'm your legal counsel. You guys can do what you like, but I'm telling you, don't feel. Don't answer a question you don't want to. You can already just dance around it if you wish. It's up to you guys.
Political advice. A spin doctor right there.
Here's one reason. If you're someone who holds conservative economic values like less taxation, Hillary Clinton does not support that, and Donald Trump does. So if you do hold those views, I would recommend that you would vote for Donald Trump if you were just looking at that issue.
All right, we'll take it. Thank you.
But it's a purely hypothetical situation, I assume.
Okay, it looks like we have some very early results from 3 states. So New Hampshire at the moment, it looks like 41% of the vote is going towards Hillary Clinton, with 52% of the vote going towards Donald Trump. And there's 4 electoral votes at stake.
New Hampshire, but that's a tough state, right?
We also have Kentucky, where 29% of the vote is going towards Hillary Clinton and 67% is going towards Donald Trump. And there are 8 electoral college votes at stake. And we also have Indiana, where 26% of the vote is going towards Hillary Clinton and 70% of the vote is going towards Donald Trump. And there are 2 electoral college votes at stake. 11 electoral college votes at stake. Sorry. So, how do you react to that recent news?
The 3 states in are now New Hampshire, Indiana, and what was the second one?
Kentucky.
Kentucky, okay.
Okay, well, I think New Hampshire is a shame because that's a swing state. So this leaves a path open for Donald Trump to the White House. But yeah, I think Indiana and Kentucky were somewhat expected that it would go to the Republican nominee.
Well, there's still.
So, it's of course it's a disappointment because I hope no one would vote for Donald Trump as well. That's also that doesn't make sense either. So, but I think there is more than enough opportunity for Hillary Clinton to win. But yeah, of course, this will be. I don't know. Are there still some polling places open somewhere in the country?
Yes, the polling places are still open. This is just preliminary data. The polls aren't even closed yet, so this could all change.
Yeah, it could all change.
Oh, okay. So those are really.
Yeah, no, those are just those are not final data numbers.
Okay, I see.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap things up here. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. And for those of you at home right now, don't go away. We have an interview with Trevor McDaniel coming up, so stay tuned.
We couldn't hear that.
Media coverage definitely affected the way I voted because it portrayed some of the presidential candidates in negative and positive ways, and it really had a big impact on my decision on who I chose.
Media coverage definitely affects the way I vote. So in order to get a good perspective of what's going on with the candidates, I try and get a bunch of different perspectives from different newscasters, different media sources. Because I do think if you stick with one, they do have a bias and kind of perspective on that one person or one candidate. So I do like to switch it up and make sure that I'm getting a well-rounded perspective from the media.
I voted for a policy over party because for party voters, some of them don't actually agree with what their candidate is saying and are just voting because they think party unity is the only important thing.
I think an important issue facing the U.S. currently is foreign policy. I think we need to focus more on it because places such as Syria and other places are experiencing a civil war and people are dying and they need our help.
You're good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I think this election, 2016, is so important and more important than any that I can remember because the country is so divided. And both these candidates tend to be disliked to a great extent, although each has their supporters. But there's been so much focus on negativity, lots of misinformation out there. I think depending on who gets elected, each side is going to be angry, I think, and how we deal with it as a country is going to be really important. And I don't remember ever living through a time like this before, and I'm not really all that old. But yeah, I think it's really, really important because of just how crazy everybody is right now. And I think more important will be November 9th. Thank you.
This election is definitely more important than previous elections because the millennials are really involved this year and we're able to vote. We can get, ideas from social media and really see who the candidates are from the news and just, like Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So it's important in this election because we have a new generation of voters who can voice their opinions.
I, for one, am not in favor of the charter school expansion, mostly because, me personally being a public school student, I don't necessarily see the need. Additionally, from what I've researched, it seems that the charter school expansion will take funding money away from already underfunded public schools, and a lot of those, when public schools are underfunded, it's usually in the arts program. And me being an art student, I'm very involved with music at school. I would definitely see my very coveted music program take a huge hit. So I, for one, am not in favor of charter school expansion.
I am not in favor of the charter schools. It takes money away from our public schools. Thank you.
I would say no because it takes money away from public schools and stuff like the musical arts program. I'm big into that. I've done band for 5.5, 6 years, and it's a really big part of my life at this point. I like to play in the band for the football games and Memorial Day. It's really important to me in my everyday life. And yeah.
So I am in support of regulations on the conditions of farm animals because in other states, when it's been more regulated, it's been only positive. And I don't think that there's any real justification for not having animals have adequate space for movement and they're being raised.
State ballot question 3. Do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? And I believe that farm animals should be treated more humanely than they are because they are quite abused. And would you like to be abused like them?
On question number 3, do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? I say no because I think that animals should be treated better on farms.
Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Hello. Testing, 1, 2. Testing. Sure.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to FRS Decision 2016. We're joined now by Trevor McDaniel, a selectman in the town of Deerfield. And Trevor, last time you were here, we talked mostly regarding the state ballot questions. I think this time we're going to have more of a focus on the national presidential elections. And diving right in, Donald Trump has always prided himself on the fact that he's created many jobs as his company has. Do you think he will be an effective job creator if he is elected president?
No, I think he has created jobs in his businesses, but I don't think his policies for the country will create jobs. He may create some jobs, but we're going on 70 months of job creation. While it hasn't been extremely robust, that's the longest stretch in U.S. history. I don't think his policies, they're going to do more to, I think, in my view, damage the economy than what he would gain from, say, labor to build a wall.
In contrast, Hillary Clinton has also said that she will create jobs just in a completely different way. She would like to make renewable energy and thinks that she can create jobs that way. Do you think that would be effective?
I do. I think that putting our money behind renewable energy will create long-lasting jobs and benefit the country. And a lot of her other policies as far as building infrastructure and investing in education. She, I think, has more of a long-term, like President Obama has had more of a long-term growth strategy for jobs in the economy. And it was a long wait, but the view is he certainly created a ton of jobs in the last 8 years. So while he inherited a big deficit and we were losing them quite rapidly, he's finally turned that around. And I think with some growth with her policies, we could continue to see that upward trend.
Okay.
One of the issues we've heard a good amount of this election cycle is the issue of immigration. And how important do you feel immigration is to the country? How much of an issue is it?
I think it's a huge issue. We really need to get our immigration policy under control. Pull people out that have been in the shadows, that are earning money every day and not paying into our taxes, not paying into Social Security, and just to kind of rest this issue. We really need people that feel confident that they're not going to get dragged away in the middle of the night. They need to come out, be productive parts of the economy and society, and have a path to citizenship instead of ignoring them in the shadows right now. So I think it is a huge issue. You can't just ignore 11 million people, and you can't round them up and ship them out. So you might as well, get them to work with the system. And then also strengthen the border, strengthen our policies. I mean, right now we have a net, it's really zero. For the 300,000 people that come into our country illegally a year, 300,000 get shipped out every year. Barack Obama has exported over 2 million undocumented illegal aliens. So right now, where everyone says they're pouring over the border and taking all of our jobs and taking all of our handouts from the government and all, but if you actually look at the figures, it's net zero right now for the last several years. So I think if we address that issue and start pulling them out of the shadows and getting them to work for the country, we'd have a benefit in the end. So that's my view.
Still, with the idea of immigration, candidate Donald Trump is opposed to accepting Muslims and is against accepting refugees from the Syrian refugee crisis. Do you think this reflects who we are as a country?
No, I think that's shameful. I think we should, as a nation, I still can't get the boy in Aleppo in the back of that ambulance out of my mind, and the other boy on the beach in Greece, toddler, just face down in the sand. Is really, really emotional. They have, one, because of maybe our policies, and obviously the Assad regime have just destroyed Syria. And, Iraq, and it's our foreign policy has been a mess for a long time, and it's really hard. You can't lay it all at our feet. Even though I don't believe we should have gone to Iraq to begin with, there were still major issues there going on, and I think that ignoring the needs of these people, they need our help, and we're a country that can do both. I hear the mantra that we have enough vets that need help, we have enough poor homeless on the street that need help. Well, we do, and we're making great strides to take care of them, but I think we can do both. We're a country that can do both, and I think we need to reach out and help our fellow humans. So that's my view.
So going back to the economy, trade is something that has been discussed in the debates pretty frequently. How big of an effect do you think getting a new trade deal done will affect our economy?
It needs to be worked on. It needs to be addressed. It's very complicated. I think the country that Donald Trump has envisioned is long past. We're no longer going to have, thousands and thousands of people working in a steel mill. It just isn't there any longer. If a steel mill comes back, it's going to be mostly automated. Maybe 10% of the jobs will come back. So we just have to recognize that our economy is different. We now live in a global economy, and we need to train our youth in education, in both technical education, biotechnology, all kinds of ways of the future. We just can't train for a pour and molten steel kind of economy. We need to focus on the future. Just impresses me what's going on here today and the technology that you're learning to bring, democracy to the world. You're learning all about technology and how to send out information, and with Twitter and Facebook and all the new companies that have come up since I've graduated high school, and seeing all the different ways that you can democratize information and grow the economy. It's a tremendous amount of growth in jobs. So I think a trade deal is important, and I think that we need to still work on that. It's not as easy as a 140 character soundbite. So.
Another topic that's been brought up is the idea of equal rights. Hillary Clinton wants equal acceptance coming in and out of the country and within its own borders, and Trump is quite the opposite. Which do you think we should be?
Completely acceptable of people and their right to choose their gender, who they love, how they want to raise a child. I mean, as long as they're being a productive citizen and playing by the rules and trying to better this country, I think they should have equal rights.
And going to the ballot questions now, which of the questions on the ballot do you feel will have the greatest impact on the area that we live in?
Number 2, which would be raising the cap. I am wholeheartedly against raising the cap on charter schools. I'm not opposed to charter schools, but I think the way they're funded and the way they're governed, not being governed by a local school committee, not being governed by parents or anyone local. I was just at a school committee conference at the Cape last week, and we studied how charter schools were funded. If you have a child from Chelsea school systems pay $24,000, almost $25,000 a year to educate their child. Or you have a child from another town nearby that maybe only pays $9,000 to educate that child. So you have these two kids going to a certain charter school. The charter school is getting $24,000 from Chelsea and $9,000 from another town. Well, they're not educating that child from Chelsea twice as much as they're educating the one from, or even more than that, one from the other town. So just the whole funding formula and how it's funded, how it's reimbursed, is a major issue. It's really a civil rights issue. There is, children that are poor, come from poor families that don't have parents that are off till 9 o'clock to be able to drive them in a car that they own, maybe 30 miles away, 20 miles away to a boutique education. It's just not a fair system. So if they were going to keep charter schools, I think they should have an opt-out clause instead of an opt-in. That way that charter school would have to take every cross-section of the population and educate all the kids with all the issues that all public schools have to take. So that's a real major, that's probably the one that I've been most passionate about lately.
Sticking with the ballot questions, how do you think Massachusetts will handle an additional casino slot machine establishment?
I'm not a fan of that. I think I'm not sure I don't know the question that well, but I think there's plenty of areas for people to gamble as it is, where it's scratch tickets. We have a new casino coming in. There's casinos in Connecticut. There's casinos going to be out on the eastern part of the state. I'm not sure that the state would benefit that much more from another casino. I know that they got $80 million in revenue from the first slot machine casino. I'm not so sure we get another 80 if we had another one. It would probably dilute some. But a lot of this money comes from people that can't really afford to do it. So I'm not a huge proponent. I think we can grow our economy many other more productive ways than a casino.
Trevor McDaniel, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Don't go away. We've got more to come after the break, so see you then.
Sure. With us, we have With us, we now have Senate President Good.
Test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency broadcasting system. Had this been an actual emergency, you'd be running like hell right now.
Hello? From the other side.
What? No.
How you doing?
And what do we know?
Right.
Because the polls haven't closed. These are red.
Welcome back. With us now, we have Senate President Stan Rosenberg. Senator Rosenberg is also a longtime supporter of the Frontier Elections program, and he has been on this program each year. Thank you, Senator, and welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me again.
So we have various questions about local issues. First, question 2 is one of the most controversial topics in our state. What is your opinion on adding more charter schools?
So when I voted a couple of weeks ago, almost a couple of weeks ago now, in early voting, I voted not to add additional charter schools at this time. I think that the adding up to 12 a year, which is what the ballot question calls for, is many too many, much too fast. Over the last 20 years since we've been doing charter schools, we've been allowing an average of 4 or 5 a year, and that gives us about 78 schools at this point. And so to jump from 4 or 5 a year to up to 12 is a really big jump. It can affect the budgets of traditional public schools pretty severely.
What really strikes me is they're not even up to the cap of charter schools in the state yet.
That is correct. They have room for another 12, maybe as many as 15, and some additional charter schools can come online in underperforming districts under certain circumstances outside of the cap. So there's plenty of room for growth at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Another question on the ballot is question 4 for legalizing marijuana. How do you feel about that?
So I think that the legislature should have worked on that question as opposed to having it done on the ballot. That said, it's on the ballot, and it's a very popular question. And I voted for it, and I announced that when I did vote for it, that I was going to work to improve it based upon what we've learned in the other states. Ton of people are actually using marijuana, and I'm not talking about the medical marijuana, I'm now talking recreational marijuana. In order to get that marijuana, you either have to be growing it or buying it illegally, and that's making a lot of people lawbreakers. In addition, there's a very significant, disproportionate rate of incarceration of people for crimes associated with marijuana among poor people and people of color. And so if you're middle income and you got some money, you can buy your way out of the problem. Usually, if you're poor, you can't.
So on the marijuana question still, marijuana has many side effects such as the high feeling you get, and also possibly lowering your IQ. Do you think those will be big issues if marijuana is legalized?
So neurological scientists tell us that the brain doesn't fully form until age 25. Mm-hmm. And
Therefore, you have to be careful at what age you allow people to smoke marijuana legally. And so we should listen to those scientists and have a discussion with them and figure out what the appropriate age is at which to make it legal if the voters support it. If the voters do not support it this week, I mean today actually, it's not this week, today, if they don't vote for it, this issue will not come up again for at least 6 years on the ballot, and the legislature, I predict, would not take it up again until it went back to the ballot. So if it doesn't pass today, the conversation's over for a while. If it passes today, we have to wrestle with issues just like that.
Okay, thank you.
Also, some people are concerned with driving hazards if marijuana is legalized. Do you think that's a problem?
So there is no test yet to determine whether you have had, whether you've consumed too much and therefore going to compromise your driving ability and place yourself and others in danger. And so that's an area that's undeveloped practice in law, and we're going to have to work with the scientists and others to figure out a means of measuring what is a dangerous level. And you would hope that no one would get behind the wheel of a car having had any marijuana, but like alcohol, there is a limit that they say once you reach this limit, you definitely can't drive. We need to figure out what that limit is for marijuana. But again, we should encourage people to enjoy it at home if it becomes legal, but not to get behind the wheel of a car if they're in any way compromised, whether it's alcohol or marijuana.
Okay, over to national issues for a minute. Do you think that this whole election season has negatively affected the face of the United States? I know a lot of countries, and we just talked to our Dutch exchange students, they see if Donald Trump is elected, they think that it makes us look bad, honestly. So do you think this whole election season...
I've done a little bit of traveling internationally during this election cycle, and people are really concerned because this is not a typical election in the United States, and it surprises them because they really look to us to see what a good election looks like and a fair and open process and debate. And so it is of concern to them. That said, when the election is over in this country, we unify behind the winning candidate. The candidate becomes, in this case, President of the United States, and we should all get past our differences and past our concerns and support whoever is elected.
Sure, back to the state questions. So question one has to deal with adding a new slot machine parlor. Do you think this would help add increased tax revenue, or would it just add another
just another facility?
Yeah, another facility.
So the Gaming Commission's job is to figure out how many is too many slot parlors and casinos. They did the research. The legislature said you can have up to 1 slot parlor and up to 3 casinos. They licensed 1 slot parlor, and I was concerned and thought they probably would not approve a second slot parlor even if this ballot question passed. Now, since Revere, which is the place where the new slot parlor would be, voted it down in a referendum, under the state law, the Gaming Commission cannot move forward with licensing another slot parlor unless the community approves. The community just a couple of weeks ago voted it down. So I don't believe, even if the ballot question passes, that there would be another slot parlor, at least not in that place. And the law doesn't allow for a second slot parlor unless that law gets changed. And I don't think that that law is going to get changed. This was basically some greedy people acting in their own self-interest as opposed to the interest of the Commonwealth.
Hey, that's interesting, because question 3 also has been accused of targeting one farm. That was a question on the farm animals.
Yeah, so it didn't actually target that one farm, but there is only one farm in Massachusetts that would actually be impacted by that.
It was interesting.
Yeah, and we're going to see tonight what happens. I know when the Diamond Farm in Wendell has worked really hard to try to change their practices, larger cages, fewer birds, etc. But you know, the law will be the law, and if the ballot question passes, it's going to have an impact on that farm.
Do you think it will raise prices of food in the area if that is passed?
All of the experts have said that it would raise the price of food, and it's not just the food that would be grown here in the Commonwealth, but also the food that would be imported into the Commonwealth from elsewhere. But it's also going to be interesting to see what happens, because there is a provision in the United States Constitution that relates to interstate commerce, and I think some people are going to raise the question of whether that would be compromising interstate commerce, and therefore it might get challenged in the courts. It might.
Right.
Another national question. What about this election do you think sets it apart from elections in the past?
This is the highest degree of divisiveness that I've ever witnessed in my life, and I know we have a history of elections in this country where you might call them very colorful because certain kinds of charges get made here and there, but nothing that resembles what we've just been through here have I witnessed in my lifetime, and I hope we never have an election that mimics this, because a lot of, it's not just that people got divided, but there was a lot of fear-mongering and hate and anger that was set loose among the electorate. And it's interesting because Bernie Sanders was also an alternative candidate, if you think about it. He was the change candidate in the Democratic Party, and Mr. Trump was the change candidate in the Republican Party. And Bernie Sanders energized huge numbers of people all across the country, but there was no violence, and there was no hate and speech, and there was no making fun of people and their religion and their appearance or anything. It was all around ideas and trying to get people energized around making America better by talking about specific issues and ideas, as opposed to slogans like "Let's make America great again," without any real significant proposals for how to make it a better country. And we're getting signals.
Okay, so we have some preliminary voting results here. So for Virginia, there's 13 Electoral College votes at stake. It looks like Hillary Clinton has 50% of the vote, with Donald Trump at 45% of the vote at the moment. And we also have Vermont. We do not have exact numbers, but the Associated Press predicts that Hillary Clinton will win. So, and then again, our Florida estimate rewritten at the moment.
Great.
But
well, Vermont was the home of Bernie is the home of Bernie Sanders, and very strong Democratic voting state. And Virginia is kind of a toss-up these days, but Hillary Clinton's ahead at this point.
So we'll see how that continues over the night.
And isn't that the home state of Mr. Kaine, the vice presidential candidate, who is U.S. Senator, which means if they win, there'll be a U.S. Senate race in that state.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Turns out.
Yes. Well, thank you, Senator Rosenberg.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for doing this and for inviting me each year. And it's still early enough. If you haven't gotten to the polls yet, it's not too late to get to the polls.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be continuing after a short break. Thank you very much.
Media coverage definitely affected the way I voted, because it portrayed some of the presidential candidates in negative and positive ways, and it really had a big impact on my decision on who I chose.
Media coverage definitely affects the way I vote. So in order to get a good perspective of what's going on with the candidates, I try and get a bunch of different perspectives from different newscasters, different media sources, because I do think if you stick with one, they do have a bias and kind of perspective on that one person or one candidate. So I do like to switch it up and make sure that I'm getting a well-rounded perspective from the media.
I voted for a policy over party because for party voters, some of them don't actually agree with what their candidate is saying and are just voting because they think party unity is the only important thing.
I think an important issue facing the U.S. currently is foreign policy. I think we need to focus more on it because places such as Syria and other places are experiencing a civil war and people are dying and they need our help.
You're good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I think this election, 2016, is so important, and more important than any that I can remember, because the country is so divided. And both these candidates tend to be disliked to a great extent, although each has their supporters. But there's been so much focus on negativity, lots of misinformation out there. I think depending on who gets elected, each side is going to be angry, I think, and how we deal with it as a country is going to be really important. And I don't remember ever living through a time like this before, and I'm not really all that old. But yeah, I think it's really, really important because of just how crazy everybody is right now. And I think more important will be November 9th. Thank you.
This election is definitely more important than previous elections because the millennials are really involved this year and we're able to vote. We can get, ideas from social media and really see who the candidates are from the news and just, like Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So it's important in this election because we have a new generation of voters who can voice their opinions.
Trump has won.
I, for one, am not in favor of the charter school expansion, mostly because me personally being a public school student, I don't necessarily see the need. Additionally, from what I've researched, it seems that the charter school expansion will take funding money away from already underfunded public schools. And a lot of those, when public schools are underfunded, it's usually in the arts program. And me being an art student, I'm very involved with music at school. I would definitely see my very coveted music program take a huge hit. So I, for one, am not in favor of charter school expansion.
I am not in favor of the charter schools. It takes money away from our public schools.
Okay, that's fine, I guess.
I would say no because it takes money away from public schools and stuff like the musical arts program. I'm big into that. I've done band for 5.5, 6 years, and it's a really big part of my life at this point. I like to play in the band for the football games and Memorial Day. It's really important to me in my everyday life. And yeah.
So I am in support of regulations on the conditions of farm animals, because in other states, when it's been more regulated, it's been only positive. And I don't think that there's any real justification for not having animals have adequate space for movement, and they're being raised.
State ballot question 3. Do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? And I believe that farm animals should be treated more humanely than they are because they are quite abused. And would you like to be abused like them?
On question number 3, do you support the regulations of the conditions of farm animals? I say no because I think that animals should be treated better on farms.
What? Yes.
Hi, I'm Aaron Dorshow. Today, we also have results from Frontier Regional's mock election. The student body voted for the presidents and for the state ballot questions. So we'll be looking at those results right now. Okay, so for the mock election, 56.8% of the student body voted for Hillary Clinton, that is grades 7 through 12, while we have 26.5% vote for Donald Trump, and a bunch of other parties and individuals were also voted for, a good 20, 70, at least 25%, less than 25%, a good 20% of different individuals. So that's fascinating. It's interesting to see how many of the students took the election seriously. Okay, 93.5% of the student body thought this election was negative, which is not surprising. We have heard a lot of rhetoric that is worrying during this election cycle from both sides. So it is not surprising whatsoever. So it looks like 67% of the students voted for the candidate because the other candidate was not fit to be president, which is honestly sad. You should want to vote for your person, not because you hate someone else, because you view their ideas as being correct. But since we have come to the point where this is not happening, it is sad. So it looks like that the student population is at least partly influenced by their parents. 65.6% of the student body voted the same as their parents, probably because their parents instilled in them the same views and morals as they have, which would help them vote for the same person as their parents would. And that looks like to be all the data we have at the moment. I would invite everyone to continue watching, and we'll be back after a short break.
D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Kentucky, Indiana, and Georgia are
Oh
all
my!
hurting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to FRS Decision 2016. I'm Zach Pels, and I'm joined again by Aaron Dorshow and Melissa Shaw. And we have some results, or not results. We have the as they stand now from certain states.
Okay, so for Indiana, we have a final result of 32% for Hillary Clinton and 63% for Donald Trump. For Kentucky, we also have a final result of 31% for Hillary Clinton and 65% for Donald Trump. For Georgia, the results are still changing, but as of a few minutes ago, it was 25% for Hillary Clinton and 73% for Donald Trump. And for Vermont, the final results are 54% for Hillary Clinton and 41% for Donald Trump.
As of right now, New Hampshire is 41% for Hillary and 52% for Trump. The final result for West Virginia is unknown the percentages, but it's known that Trump has won. And the unfinalized percentage in South Carolina is 48% for Hillary and 51% for Trump.
And we've just got back Florida, who's at the moment is really in a tight battle right now. But it's 48% for Hillary Clinton and 49% for Trump, and that's really something we'll have to watch as the night progresses. So, other than Florida, the only surprise that I've seen from this is the New Hampshire. I thought that race was going to be much more contested than it was. I thought Hillary could have even possibly come out on top of that. But really, other than that, not a whole lot of surprises. What are your guys' thoughts on the data that's been coming in?
I agree. We'll, of course, see more data as the night goes on, but as of right now, not too much is surprising. So I guess we'll continue to watch.
I was also shocked by New Hampshire, but pretty much have the same view.
We have a final from West Virginia here. Trump has taken that state with 51% of the votes going in his favor and 43% going to Hillary Clinton. And so that's just confirmation on West Virginia. That's all for this quick update. We'll be back after this break, so stick around. Welcome back, everybody, to FRS Decision 2016. Wrapping up here, we have our electoral map with the results in so far. And while a lot of the votes are not yet reporting, it's a good scale to see what's going on, and it's fun to watch throughout the night. So, Aaron, if you want to go more in depth about what's going on.
Sure. It looks like the results are final in Vermont, Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia, with Clinton winning Vermont and Donald Trump winning the other states. Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia are all leaning towards Donald Trump, with Florida slightly leaning towards Hillary Clinton. So we have a long night ahead of us, and I'm sure these results will change over that night. So I would like to have everyone to just keep watching on other stations after this to see how the results continue to come in.
And as the show goes, I've enjoyed presenting this to you guys, and I'm sure the Aaron and Melissa can say the same. We got some very informed commentary about the political climate, and it was neat to see what other people, especially public officials, have to say regarding this election. So if you guys want to add to that.
I think this was a really cool thing to be a part of. It's a way to engage in politics since we can't vote.
Yes, not being able to vote is a bummer, but helping inform others and being informed ourselves is a great situation to be in. So I'm glad we could be a part of this.
And on top of this, it's important not to get lost in the fact that there's a shooting that had been reported in Los Angeles. So our thoughts go out to anyone who's been affected by that. And so that'll be it for us tonight. Thank you all for watching, and have a good rest of your evening.